Welcome back, everyone, to Onefinnet Investment Banking Forum number 2. We had one of these a few weeks back, and feedback's been great. And we had another 300, 400 people on that one. We're expecting 300 to 350 people sign up here. For those who we were able to admit, excited to have you on here. We're super excited to have on an amazing set of panelists. Who we will intro in a second. Look, for those who don't know Onefinnet, I think I've met most of the people in the audience here, the largest sort of high finance platform in the world. This is for myself. I'm Kaushik, the founder. I'll kind of share in a minute how to connect with me. This is the third sort of separate private equity platform business that I've built over my career. And so really excited to share that all with everyone here. Since 2021, where we started Onefinnet, we've trained and helped place over 100,000 people right into finance across IB, PE, VC, hedge funds, AI, from analyst all the way to sort of partner. The goal is to obviously get a lot of ambitious people into top careers, and also build the next generation of professionals and leaders. So at every point in your career, right, they'll have different things that you'll be focused on. Five main sell platforms, I guess, that we've kind of built here. One is via top tier learning, which is with top professionals at top firms, right? Examples of this is events like this, right? We've had 300 plus events, and I think by now have over 1,500 videos in our academy, so you can go check that out. High quality trainings. We do train all the top 15 MBAs, all the top 30 undergrad schools every year. Top tier networking, like I said, we have in-person and the Spot networking platform. Top opportunities from the largest high finance job platforms in the world, supporting over 700 billion of funds on the platform, as well as a coaching program that we added in the last couple years, which has also obviously been going great. So super excited to share that with everyone here. Upcoming events, guys. I think this just got released. So for anyone here who's in the finance career track, so you could be a student or a professional, we're going to have on pretty much like a laundry list of the top buy side firms to talk about elite career paths, right? So one of the biggest, points that feedback areas that we've received from our students and professionals is kind of the lack of clarity from that analyst to sort of the partner levels. So we're bringing on for private equity, growth, venture capital, hedge funds to talk about that career path from junior analyst all the way to partner. So this one will sell out. So definitely register now if you want to join this, and the QR code's here as well. Next Saturday, I'm having on a mega fund private equity. The next Sunday, we're having on a hedge fund event. So we're going to go in through hedge fund recruiting, whether it's investing, multi-manager, single manager, quant, software investment, software engineering, et cetera. So that's the link to this event. And then upcoming, we're having a hedge fund training. So this is more of a 4 or 5 hour training in January with a Citadel Millennium PM, more to come on that, and then some podcasts and things like that. So all that stuff going on, which we'll go over. Kaushik here, I guess, as I mentioned, everyone who I've met, I've spent the last 10 years in private equity and banking. I started with Onefinnet, like I said, the largest high finance platform used by the top firms and top professionals across investing, M&A, AI, talent, coaching, training, and networking. So all the organizations, all the firms and people, recruiting, Spot, networking platform, coaching, academy, all that. So we have a ton of things under the umbrella here. But without further ado, today I'm excited to introduce our amazing panelists here today. So Jeff, I'll start with a quick background, but also where you are now, what you focus on within Evercore, and maybe how your first, for your banking analyst kind of years going. So we'll start with that.
Yeah, of course. So thanks again, Kaushik, and thank all of you guys for hopping on a Saturday morning. I'd say, so I'm a Penn graduate, and I ended up joining the restructuring group at Evercore, fairly interested in the generalist program, and also I think the more legal aspects of restructuring. We can definitely talk about that further on in the panel, but I've been a first year for I think around 6 months now, and it's been great exposure, as I'm sure everybody else will say something similar with modeling, the PowerPoint, and just being able to speak with more senior folks at the firm. So hopefully that covers a brief
Amazing.
introduction.
Carson from Morgan Stanley, we'll go to you next.
Cool. Thanks everyone for coming. I guess quickly. So I'm Carson. I'm a second year analyst at Morgan Stanley in our industrials team. I would say I'm interested in industrials because it's such a broad set of end markets. It's neat to be able to work from everything from chemicals to aerospace and defense to packaging, and then a variety of things in between. But then I would also say a difference of products too. So everything from M&A, But also we've worked on some IPOs, gotten to do some different follow-ons. Activist defense is becoming more popular. So seeing a variety of those products has been neat as well. So I'm looking forward to meeting everyone today.
Amazing. Thank you, Carson. Appreciate it. Let's go to Krishna at Centerview. If you can go next.
Yep, I'm happy to. Thanks again, Kaushik, for organizing this, and appreciate you all hopping on here on a Saturday morning. I'm Krishna. I'm a second year analyst at Centerview, and I largely work with restructuring as well. I went to school at the University of Michigan as an econ major, and essentially what got me interested in restructuring to start off was one of the investment clubs I was part of on campus had a debt pitch going on, which I was a part of. So trying to understand companies from a whole different capital structure perspective and trying to understand, especially in kind of distressed scenarios, what's gotten them to the position they are in and what are the tools they have available to right size that was something I found very interesting. So I kind of pursued that through a couple different credit related internships as a freshman and a sophomore. And that kind of directly led to the interest and skill set to be able to recruit for restructuring, which, got lucky enough to end up here at Centerview from there.
Amazing. Thank you, Krishna. Thanks for that background. Let us go to Michael from Citi next.
Hey guys, I'm Michael. Thanks for coming on. I'm in the Global Industrials group. And for me, I think industrials was interesting for the same reason as Carson. I think you get to work on a lot of different products. But I also like that I get to work on like industrial technology, robotics, shipping, railroad, all of that. So it's been a really active group, and I've really enjoyed my experience so far.
Amazing. Thank you, Michael. Let us go to Krishna from Evercore.
Hey, yeah, no, thanks for putting this all together. So I'm Krishna. I'm currently at Evercore within the private capital advisory team. The team is focused, sub three different sub teams. So I'm on the GP led secondaries team, focused on things like continuation vehicles, strip sales, things of that nature. Happy to kind of go into that in more detail and kind of what that means in practice. But going back, I was at Carnegie Mellon and studied economics and statistics. In that time, when I started to look at banking, looking at different industries, specifically the secondaries market, and then specifically the GP-led secondaries market was and continues to be kind of the fastest growing area of markets, and one of the fastest growing areas of finance broadly as well. And so that combined with kind of a leading market position led me to be pretty interested in the group. The group is generalist across industries, and then as well you get pretty broad exposure to different subsectors across buyout, growth, venture, and then some credit as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Krishna. And Carson from JP Morgan.
Hey, yeah, I'm excited to be here. My name is Carson Schubert in JP Morgan's middle market investment banking coverage team. I sit here in New York. The appeal to me from this group was just the industry agnostic side of things, and also the product agnostic stuff too. So I get to do M&A, capital raising, and work across a broad spectrum of industries, although I do spend a lot of my time within industrials and consumers. But happy to talk more about the platform here at JPM later on, but excited to be here and to meet everybody.
Amazing. Thank you, Carson. Astha, thanks for jumping on from Moelis.
Awesome. Yeah, happy to be here. My name is Astha. I am at Moelis in their SF office. I do tech M&A. And then I guess kind of what brought me here. I think my interest in tech kind of broadened through the curriculum there as well as the community there, and ended up having some great conversations out here in the SF office. And so made the move.
Okay, amazing. So we have a lot of topics to cover with everyone here. And first of all, thank you for the panelists. The rough agenda for the session, guys, we're going to spend about 40 minutes with the group here. A lot of questions that you guys have already submitted. If you have questions for the panelists, just put them in the chat and we'll try to get through as many as possible. It's going to be, we're quite comprehensive. We're going to cover recruiting. We're going to do, networking, interviewing, and then also some kind of keys to success for the summer as well as on the job, right? So let's do that. So the first place though I do want to start off is talk to us a little bit about day in the life of a banker, right? So what are all the tasks that you're doing? What are the skill sets that are, highlighted? And kind of how would you best describe that day to day? Obviously, every day is different. Anybody on the panel can kick us off, but day in the life of an investment banker and sort of what are the key things to note for our audience?
I'm happy to go unless someone else wants to. So I actually just announced my first deal yesterday, so I'm happy to talk more about that process. On a day in the life of an investment banker, most of your tasks will be in PowerPoint and Excel. For this like specific thing I was working on, a management presentation, we would then go into due diligence once we had our buy, and then you go and announce a deal. But what that means for me on a day-to-day basis is start like going to PowerPoint, talking to the CEO, talking to the CFO, and trying to figure out the various business units and what the financials are and how we can find a valuation for the company using what you guys like know of, like a DCF, an ACTIL, any of those processes. And I'll do that in the morning. I might do that in the afternoon, and then you might have some calls throughout to talk about the deal and what's going on. But that's like a very high level. I don't know if someone else wants to go into something more specific.
Amazing. Thank you, Michael. So basically a deal process, right? You're in this case, an advisor to one of the parties, and you're working through with the couple things that Michael highlighted, which is really cool, is one, interaction with senior management, right? So you do routinely, like our first year analysts or second year analysts or even associates, routinely interact with CFO, CEOs, build models, right? That's one thing Michael didn't touch on yet, but effectively like building financial models and then putting together presentations and then running the process, right? So all the elements of an M&A process. So thank you, Michael, for kicking us off. Any others want to join and kind of add to this on the day in the life of a banker?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this from the more restructuring side of things. So I guess you can broaden this into live deal work, something just prospecting and admin work. So a lot of the live deal work is, in my opinion, some of the most interesting work you're on in restructuring. All the analysis that Michael spoke about, Excel, PowerPoint, has the general framework of understanding how can we manipulate a company's capital structure to prevent some deterioration of the business. So whether that be a business turnaround, extending out debt maturities, and that kind of informs all of the PowerPoint and Excel. In terms of prospecting, you can divide this into kind of three like subcategories. You have various screens you're doing. Easiest, quickest way in restructuring is probably bond trading prices. Any actionable items, you then move on to profiles. So that's gonna be like a company overview, an industry overview, like a capital structure. And then from there on, if there's a business opportunity available, you might do a pitch. So that's all of the work that's involved in a live deal, the analysis, the Excel, but condensed in kind of like a day, or not a day, but like a week or maybe more. So that's where like these live deal sprints come in. And then finally, the last bucket is really just ad hoc admin tasks you're doing. So setting up closing dinners, for example, making deal toys, scheduling calls, similar to what Michael also touched on.
Amazing. Thanks, Jeff, on the restructuring side. By the way, thank you, Jeff. I think if anyone, folks that are interested in restructuring, obviously you could talk to Jeff and Krishna in our breakouts. But I will share another resource we had on, I think, Evercore and Houlihan for an hour-long restructuring workshop. I think it has over like 40,000 views on YouTube. So you can go and watch, this just an hour long of like what interviews are all about, and kind of full case studies. It's very helpful for both investment banking, but also for private equity, private credit interviews. So anyway, just point that out. Carson from Morgan Stanley as a second year, you can comment a little bit on the skill set you are looking for in first year analyst, as well as kind of what's helped you, be successful on the job.
Yeah, of course, happy to. I think a few things. So one, I think the first non-negotiable is just having a good attitude. And I think in the first 6 to 8 months when you're figuring out your role in the team and who you're working with, that's incredibly important. It is super easy to jump into a kind of a complaining cycle. At the end of the day, it doesn't help. And so being open to things and working with teams has helped me tremendously. I've always had interest in the aerospace and defense kind of subvertical and have been able to work with that team quite a bit. And I would say it's working with them over time that has allowed me now to be able to work in that space a little bit more. So that's one. And in terms of like true hard skills, I think obviously there's a technicality that's helpful to have in any part of this job. I don't think it has to be, I think a lot of it's learned on the job, but it's really understanding the things that you're working on and actually the why behind the projects. I think when you get an opportunity to do something, it's take the model, it's to do something that might be a little bit more difficult than what you've been used to, you should try it because there will always be teams to guide you. But that can be very good to kind of jump the learning curve. I think attention to detail is incredibly important. I think another thing that when we get into some of these live deal sprints, there are so many moving pieces because you might have a modeling work stream and a wrap work stream with the lenders, and you have a sell side materials, or you have all these different one odd kind of valuation asks that might come up. all of that can allow teams to miss little things and miss little deadlines. And so I think another good thing as an analyst is just have a kind of running list of everything that's possibly going on. At the end of the day, you can recap it, and people really appreciate that. So that's a few kind of strategies I think are fairly helpful.
Amazing, Carson. And thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I think let's pivot a little bit to recruiting. Most of our kind of second years, third years are going through recruiting right now. So I would love to take this brain trust that we have from some of the top banks in the world on going through kind of a lot of the pain points slash processes of recruiting, right? Let me have our boutique folks start with what is a pitch that you would give or the candidate should give for why boutique? Where should our candidates be? And if they're quote behind, kind of what should they be doing?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. So yeah, in terms of boutique recruiting, I think there's some common ways to kind of frame, why boutique, which is, the leaner deal teams. There's no balance sheet, so the role of pure advisory for a lot of these firms. And then as well as there's definitely a strong exposure and mentorship very early on. And so I think those are like primarily a lot of the things that were touched on, and I'm sure others um, might have some additional notes. But in terms of recruiting, I think where we're at is, we're having a lot of coffee chats. There's some schools that are coming in person for visits. And then I think people are aiming to get in like 3 to 4 coffee chats with first year analysts. And then there's like a plus if you've talked to maybe someone that's more senior. In terms of interviews, believe they'd be kicking off preliminarily around or early January or end of January, but I think that's apt to change.
Amazing. Astha, can I ask you on that point? So the goal is to get sort of 3 to 5 like really solid contact, right? So how would you advise our people if they're feeling like they're short of that? How do they continue to kind of build that connectivity as well as sort of impact on the networking side?
Yeah, I think in terms of networking, it's definitely tough sometimes coming from, either semi-targets, non-targets to get in contact with people. Whoever you do get in contact with, I'd prioritize making those calls meaningful as well as maintaining those relationships. And so, we definitely get flooded with emails, and it's important to follow up. Like I try to take some time, like once a week, to just respond to emails, but a lot of times there's calls that end up getting rescheduled, and so if someone doesn't follow up, it's tough for that to get lost in email traffic. I'd also say it's helpful to, like, if someone connects you with someone, it's good to maintain that connection and reach back out to the person that originally connected you to that contact, give them an update about, how, or give them a thank you on connecting you to that person, how that conversation went. And so just being like thoughtful about each of your interactions that you do end up having. And so even if you can't get to that 3 to 5, I think if you can make the 1 or 2 that you have very meaningful and stand out, I think that's a good way to navigate that, at least.
Amazing advice. I completely agree with all that.
Yeah, no, happy to talk about that. One thing I'd also say, just to, but I think honestly, if you have one person really pushing for you or 2 people really pushing for you, that typically carries more weight than 5 people that said, oh, maybe I talked to that kid and recognized their name across the list, but it's necessarily, vouch for one person. I think that is a strategy that at least, it's very bank dependent, but can really work at boutiques where it is smaller teams. To, the question here in terms of timelines, yeah. Kind of like Asa said, we're targeting, I think, January 1st applications and interviews happening, typically like they're going to start like, a couple weeks after that, and then just go from there, and kind of waves until we fill our class up. And so kind of where you want to be on the timeline, yeah, to the point, just having good touch points and really knowing which ones you're prioritizing as well, and kind of having a good story as well, and making sure, for that first interview, you explain that, yes, I'm probably interviewing for a bunch of places, but this is the place that I want to go work.
Yeah, great point. So timelines are a little bit earlier this year, right? Last year we had late January to February, but this time it's kind of a little bit earlier. So be aware of that. And to Krishna's point, between now until then, and by the way, it just because that's when the first interview happens, interviews will go on throughout the full kind of semester, right? So being ready kind of in that window, and then definitely using, between finals and, spring, a winter break, to get really up to speed on networking, et cetera. Really important. Cool. Jeff, anything to add on? I know Krishna already mentioned the Evercore timelines, but anything to add on that side?
I would say no, it's been covered pretty well. The one point I'd also make is definitely just general interview prep, keep up with the news. You can subscribe to various newsletters, Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, and then it's just to have things to talk about once those invites come out.
100%. And we're going to get to interviews in a minute, and then we'll probably do another interview workshop like in January, guys. And let's now shift to bulge brackets. So we have Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Citi. What should we expect as far as timelines for bulge brackets? And then same question, what should our candidates be doing between now until those timelines? And also, how would you answer the why bulge bracket versus boutique question? Maybe those are the three questions I would ask.
I can get us started here. In terms of timeline first, everybody I think is kind of aligning on that January 1st deadline or application deadline. So I definitely want to get your applications in as early as possible. And in terms of like a why bulge bracket, I think you flip the narrative of why boutique. And instead of just the pure advisory role, it's the opportunity to see all of the different arms and divisions within an investment bank. And like for me, for instance, within the middle market, we are constantly talking to our corporate banking partners, every other team that you can possibly imagine. So I think that narrative of like, I get broad exposure, I'm here at a very strong platform, you have a really formal training program, which the boutiques do as well, I think are all valid answers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all the same. Morgan Stanley will be January 1st as well. And then I think I completely agree. Basically, just want to say, hey, look, I wanted to understand all the needs that a company may have and all the different arms that they're looking to do. And to understand that strategy, I want to be able to touch a wide variety of products. I've also actually, I think there's plenty of benefits to the boutique model in the bulge bracket, depending on where you go. One of the things I've enjoyed is that spending time with both private capital raises as well as doing an IPO or two has been an incredibly interesting kind of lens that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and something that I think will be helpful for moving forward. And so, but nothing else that's new on top of everyone else.
From a restructuring perspective, interviews will probably be in January at some point for both diversity, non-diversity. So assuming Super Day going to go in sometime mid to late January, then initial rounds might be earlier in the month. So things will kick off pretty quickly after the holidays is my assumption. From a more generalist perspective, last year's Super Day for us was, I believe, very early March. I generally just with how recruiting keeps moving up every year, I wouldn't be surprised if that timeline moved up by a couple weeks from last year. So I think late February is probably a reasonable expectation for our Super Day. So kind of working backwards from there, initial rounds will probably be sometime during the month of February, for which you definitely want to make sure you have your networking and your outreach done ahead of time.
Amazing.
So that's kind of the timeline.
Thank you,
that I
Krishna.
have on my end.
So now let's go to the second topic, which is networking. So you guys on the other side are getting, 100 emails a week, I'm sure now, from students and candidates from all the different schools, all the different, geographies, all the backgrounds, all this stuff. So for the benefit of this audience, like what stands out? What gets you guys to respond to emails? What have you noticed very strong candidates do on those networking coffee chats that makes you want to advance them to the next sort of round and put them on the list?
We get a lot of emails. I think it's been hundreds for sure. I think what stands out for me is that you've actually looked at my LinkedIn or some sort of background on me and put that in my email. I get so many that are just, oh, hey, Michael, like I'm interested in Citi Industrials. Like, can we chat? I'm like, I get this copy pasted email from so many people. But when you put something that maybe we have a connection to, or something that interested you on my LinkedIn or some background, then I'll be more likely to talk to you. And I think when you get on the phone, it's important to show that you have other interests than just finance. Like make sure you talk about, oh, like I saw this deal that you worked on, or I'm in this investment club and this is a company that interests me, and ask the right questions. But I think trying to come up with a relationship aspect too is really important. That's how I think you can make yourself unique rather than what everyone else is asking on those calls.
Agreed. Connectivity, super, super important. And this is true for every level. Like even for my private equity now, like pre-associate or pre-MBA associate, or even VP, like that connectivity. And there's a huge emphasis on networking where, later on as well. So it's a skill I want everyone here to have, obviously. Networking and what stands out in the email as well as in the session. So other panelists want to take this kind of to advise. So Carson, why don't you go next from JP Morgan?
Yeah, I can jump in. So to Michael's point, you definitely want to show some personality on these calls. It just makes the conversation much more flowy and kind of enjoyable in a way. People are taking 30 minutes, 40 minutes outside of their day to speak with you, so make it very valuable. And I think a quick way you can do that is, if you get on the phone and somebody says, "Hey, like, how are you?" Instead of just saying good, give them some context into terms of what's going on in your life. School, did you just finish finals? Are you going home for the holidays? Give some life to the conversation. And then I do also have some opinions on kind of just the overall messaging and networking. First off, the subject of your email should be like the very first couple of words should be your connection, Virginia Tech or your high school, especially with the external blockers. You can't see the entire subject line, so you want to be very specific. You also need to be super clear in your emails, make the ask very direct. You'd be very surprised on how many emails I think a lot of us get of people not really asking directly for a coffee chat, and you want to be very specific. And also on that, the logistics of the coffee chat. If you're meeting them in person, make it known to where you're going to meet them, how you're going to call them. All of that stuff is extremely important and kind of overlooked at times. You want to make sure you're double checking your emails, make sure you have the right bank name. You don't want to be sending something to GS and say MS instead of, or the right name. I think another thing you can do is make sure you send thank you emails. I think that's a forgotten kind of skill. Stay in touch with people. I think when you're going through this recruitment process, you're asking so much of the bankers and the people to give you their time, or to give their time to you. And a quick way you can just make it known that their conversation that you have with them is valuable. It's like, "Hey, thank you very much. Your time is valuable. I appreciate the advice you gave me," and on and on. And in a month, you can say, "Hey, thank you. I used exactly what you said, and it turned out well for me." That's the valuableness that you have for them, instead of just not saying anything, not following up, and them not understanding if it was helpful for them to get on the phone with you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's really, really great advice, guys. That kind of non-transactional nature is something that's going to help you throughout life. Even more tactically here, right? You may have reached out to 8, 9 banks, you get one offer. You may have to go back to those bankers at the end of the summer if you want to re-recruit or whatever, right? So kind of closing the loop, like Carson's saying, and keeping them on your team, super, super important as you go through this stuff. Great. Others on keys to success, either on the coffee chat call and or in emails that stand out in networking.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in next. Something that I see is a lot of students often don't do a great job of following up, even if you didn't get a response initially. The thing is, we'll end up being super busy. Kind of, I think someone else might have been mentioning if we get 60 or 70 emails in a week and have time to respond to 4 or 5, it's a pretty low rate that we'll actually be able to get to. And a lot of kids will end up doing, they'll email us one week, maybe even email us the week after, and then they'll kind of stop following up there. Where my 2 cents is, it actually helps to follow up more times, and you can space it out different times, because whenever we have a moment, that's when we'll actually be able to see it. And then if your name is at the top of our inbox, it makes it that much easier for us to respond to you. And then kind of coming towards the call a little bit, something that I see a lot of students do and that works well is really pay attention to what we are saying and try to make it a conversation where you kind of ask follow-up questions based on exactly what we are saying. So then that kind of shows me that, hey, you're listening, you're able to think about kind of thoughtful and intelligent questions to ask in the moment. And specifically for restructuring, something that we like to see is that you have kind of a vested interest in restructuring and have done your research on it. So when you're able to ask me pretty specific questions about restructuring that show me that you at least have a decent kind of interest and understanding in the space and make it an organic conversation from there, I think that is a pretty positive indicator to me. So definitely something that I would recommend doing.
Amazing. Thank you, Krishna. Super amazing advice, especially the last one on active listening, because we have our own agenda that you guys would have. And then if you don't follow up on a deal, it just feels like there's like an opportunity that was missed. Thank you, Krishna. Any others on keys to great info calls, or maybe what to avoid on the info calls or coffee chats, and then what to avoid or have in your networking emails? Anyone else, guys, on the panel?
I can give some quick actionable items. So you just want to make the banker's time, I think, as easy for them or as frictionless for them to respond to you as possible. So make sure to I would recommend sending a resume. That's my personal philosophy. Second is providing times, and then finally sending a calendar invite once that time is confirmed.
Yeah, that's great advice. And sorry, one more thing, Michael. I would say even before then, just be generally available, right? Don't go in and say, hey, I'm available on Tuesday from 1 to 2. Like, just be like, hey, I will make my schedule work, for where you are, and just let me know when you're available. Avoid sending things like Calendlies. It just makes it feel like much more kind of like, informal than it needs to be. I think I agree on the resume is a good idea, especially if you don't get a follow-up, right? If you don't get an email, then I would probably follow up with a resume. So all great advice. Michael, was there something else you wanted to add? So let's now go to the next topic, which before we do the breakouts, it's going to be interviews. We're going to have a separate interview workshop that's going to going through like, behaviorals, technicals, all of that. But, with the time we have, panelists kind of share what are things that you are maybe surprised by, what are things that you would recommend our next generation of bankers to be aware of. It could be anything. It could be behavioral, it could be technical, but just any panelists. Now we'll just shift a little bit to interviews before we do breakout. So anyone can go on the interviews.
I'm happy to kick it off. So for a little bit of context, in my recruiting process, I thought I did, like reflecting on it, think I did a pretty good job of being able to, get on calls, leave a positive impression on calls, and convert a lot of them to a first round interview. In my first round interviews, these are largely technical, and these are largely at boutiques as well. So definitely pretty technical. And for those, it's make sure you study the guides, make sure you have a good fundamental understanding of concepts so you can actually apply them to different situations, different numbers, all of that. And then I would get invited to super days, and a lot of those initial super days, I would struggle to convert into offers. So I kind of sat down with a mentor after that, and kind of the big thing we focused on was my behaviorals. And kind of the key point I give to a lot of kids as advice on behaviorals now is half of it is your substance. So obviously you want to make sure you have a good story that's well thought out and articulated to actually respond to the question at hand. But the other part that I think becomes pretty important in a super day when these spots are so competitive to get is your articulation of your answers. So definitely want to make sure you focus on, the word choice, your articulation, the pace of how you speak, making sure you sound super natural and have a lot of, intonation in your voice and don't sound robotic at all. So I think those things actually become pretty important come a super day time. And kind of the advice I have to kind of work on that is make a big brain dump document of, kind of brainstorming answers to different behavioral questions, kind of have bulleted points and kind of use that as a guideline to practice your speech. Like look into FaceTime camera and practice those sorts of things. Do a lot of mock interviews. And I think that really ends up helping with articulation. The one other quick thing I'd add is adding to the brain dump document would also do what I call soft technicals on them, which is kind of you want to make sure you can speak about different companies, deals, trends, industries, whatever you're reading about in a pretty intelligent fashion. So kind of adding some notes from different articles you read and having that to review on before an interview, I think is pretty helpful because then you have things you can talk about in these interviews in a pretty intelligent fashion.
Amazing. Really, really good advice. I think both on pacing yourself and preparing as well as on having most of you all will have 10 to 15 stories you want to share, but unfortunately the interview is only 20, 25 minutes, right? So how do you make that succinct? This is a problem you're going to have both in banking and PE and hedge fund and sort of MBA, all of that stuff, right? So really great points, Krishna. Others on interview best practices and what to do and what to avoid?
I think Krishna did an amazing job there. A couple things to add on. The technical side, I mean, all the information to understand the technicals is out there. You can easily Google all of them and understand the restructuring versus a coverage team technicals. So I think that's kind of not easy, but it is easy. And in terms of the behavioral stuff, I do agree with kind of the word dump, word document idea. I did the exact same thing. I took my resume and I would just make my own comments. So if somebody came in and asked me about a bullet point under one of the experiences, I would be able to talk about it. Or if they had said, hey, tell me more about this interest, I had commented and said, okay, this is what I'm going to say if they ask me about it. So I think that kind of helps you understand like truly what you did at those experiences. And then the articulation and the story and answering those behavioral questions becomes that much more easy because you've done the prep and you like truly understand what you did. Maybe the kinds of answers you can give to questions like a problem solving or tell me about a time, you can easily pull from that memory and that library of answers.
With that said, guys, let us do this. We're gonna now the breakout side here, so we're gonna assign all the panelists to breakout rooms and all the students as well. Panelists, just hang tight here with me. We're going to send all the students to the breakouts, and then we'll assign you guys. Our team will just kind of do it more manually. Okay, so we're opening up the breakout rooms right now. Okay, cool. So I think everyone's been assigned or in the process. So I think I'm just gonna do it by how I see. So maybe I'll have. Jeff and Carson, if you can go to room 1. Michael, Carson. I know Astha, you may have to drop. So Michael, Carson, and Astha, if you can go to, oh, sorry, Michael, Carson, and Krishna from Evercore, if you can go to room number 2, and then Krishna and Astha, if you can go to room number 3.